desert was silent, and the silence felt alive. Wind crawled over the cracked ground, lifting tiny clouds of dust. Above, the sky burned red, heavy with heat and sorrow. It was not a place where life belonged, and yet life clung to it stubbornly. Small plants with sharp thorns, creatures that hunted in the shadows, and the dark wings of vultures circling overhead. In the center of this wasteland lay a figure, motionless, fragile, forgotten. It was a woman, not human, but alien. Her skin a soft shade of violet that shimmered faintly under the light. Her golden hair spread across the dry earth like fallen sunlight, yet her beauty was broken by suffering. Her lips were cracked, her body weak, and her eyes half closed as if she were caught between the world of the living and the world of the dead. She had been abandoned, left alone in this cruel desert. Her own family had turned away from her, leaving her as prey for the beasts of the sky. The vultures knew it. They circled lower with every passing moment, wings beating in slow, hungry rhythm. Each shadow that passed over her face was sharper than the last, reminding her of the death that waited just above. She did not cry. She did not scream. Her strength had already left her. She only breathed, slow, shallow, weak. Every breath was a battle she was losing, but in her heart there was still a question that refused to die. Why? Why had her family cast her aside? Why had they chosen her as the sacrifice, the one to be left behind? Had her weakness made her unworthy of love? Or was survival more important than blood to them? The vultures gave no answers, only cruel stares. One landed on a broken rock nearby, tilting its head, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It opened its wings, testing the air, waiting for the moment when the last breath would leave her body. The others followed, landing one by one, the sound of their claws scraping against stone and sand. The desert was becoming a grave, and she was the offering. The woman closed her eyes, but the images did not leave. She remembered faces, her family's cold eyes the moment they turned their backs, the sound of their footsteps fading. She remembered the heavy silence that followed, heavier than any storm, and she remembered her own voice, begging, trembling, unheard. Now that silence pressed on her chest like a stone, the air grew hotter. The vultures edged closer, their wings folded and unfolded in restless hunger. One gave a cry, a long, harsh call that echoed across the desert. The others answered, the sound sharp and cruel. It was the call of hunters who knew their prey could not escape. Still, she did not move. Her body had no strength, and her spirit was dim. She thought of surrender, of letting the desert claim her. Perhaps it would be easier to end the pain, to let the earth swallow her, to let the vultures feast. And yet, even in this broken state, a spark remained, a small, stubborn spark of life that whispered, wait, wait. Even when there is no reason, wait, even when no one is coming. The vultures drew closer, their shadows falling heavy across her face. One stretched its beak toward her, sharp and black. The spark inside her flickered weakly, almost gone. The desert seemed ready to close the story, but the story was not over. Somewhere beyond the dunes, beyond the heat and silence, footsteps were moving. Someone was coming. Though she did not yet know it, her eyes closed once more, unaware that destiny was shifting. The vultures did not know either, but the desert would soon learn a truth it had never seen before. The courage of a human, the mercy of a stranger, and the power of a choice that could change everything. The alien woman lay still, her breath shallow, her body trembling. Death waited with its open wings, but the first step of salvation was already echoing in the distance, and the desert, for the first time in years, would witness hope. The sun climbed higher, and the desert seemed to burn. The air shimmered like a sheet of fire, and every breath was dry, painful, heavy. The alien woman lay on the cracked ground, her body trembling with weakness, her mind sinking deeper into the shadows. But above her, danger moved closer. The vultures were no longer content to circle. They wanted to taste the end. The largest of them landed first, its wings spread wide like black sails against the red sky. It was taller than a human child, its feathers sharp and rough, its eyes glowing with a hungry yellow light. Its beak clicked open and shut, testing the air, eager for flesh. The others followed, landing one by one, their claws scraping the rocks, their wings stirring clouds of dust. They formed a half circle around the woman, predators waiting for the final moment. Their movements were slow, but certain. Each step was heavy with the promise of death. The woman opened her eyes slightly. The sight of their shapes filled her with fear, but her body would not move. Her limbs felt like stone, her voice broken into silence. Even if she tried to cry out, no one would hear. One vulture stretched its neck forward. Its beak hovered just above her arm. It gave a harsh hiss, tasting the heat of her skin. Another snapped its wings, shaking off the dust. The desert became a cage, and she was trapped inside. The largest bird lifted its head and gave a cry. The sound echoed far and wide, a signal to the others. The prey is ours. More shadows fell from the sky as new vultures joined, circling closer and closer. The air was filled with the beating of wings, the sound of hunger gathering. The woman's heart beat faintly. Her mind whispered, "This is the end." There was no family to save her, no hand to pull her up. Her story would end here, forgotten in the desert, bones scattered under alien skies. But even as the vulture's claw set in, the spark inside her would not fully die. Her eyes searched the horizon, though her body was weak. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps only hope. But something inside her refused to let go completely. The vultures stepped closer, their eyes sharp and cruel. One pecked at her clothing, tearing a strip of fabric free. Another lowered its head, brushing its beak against her golden hair. She flinched weakly, her hand twitching. The vultures hissed, excited by movement. They wanted her alive just long enough to struggle. The desert wind grew stronger, carrying the smell of heat and dust. The vultures hissed and shrieked louder. Their cries echoed across the wasteland. It was a sound that told the world, the hunt has begun. The woman closed her eyes again. If this was her last moment, she did not want to see their faces. But deep in the distance, far beyond the dunes, something stirred, a sound hidden under the cries of the birds, a sound that did not belong to this desert. The vultures did not notice it at first. They were too focused on the prize before them. But the sound grew louder, slow, steady, heavy, the sound of footsteps on cracked earth. The woman did not hear it clearly, but her spirit felt it. Her weak body shivered not only from fear, but from something new. It was not the whisper of death. It was the whisper of change. The largest vulture opened its wings and leapt forward. Its shadow covered her, its claws stretched wide. It was ready to strike, to claim the first bite. The other birds screamed in hunger, wings beating like drums, but the sound of footsteps grew closer, closer, stronger, undeniable, and with it came something the desert had long forgotten: hope. The vultures hissed, their heads snapping toward the horizon. The woman's eyes fluttered open, her gaze catching a faint shape in the distance. It was blurred by the heat, but it was moving. It was walking, determined, unstoppable. The vultures shrieked again, angry at the interruption, but the figure did not stop. Each step echoed like thunder across the wasteland. Each step carried a promise that death would not win so easily today. The alien woman could not yet believe it, but she had seen enough to know. The desert had gained a new player, and the vultures, for the first time, hesitated. The story was about to change. The hunter's circle was breaking, and where despair once ruled, a stranger was walking straight into the storm. The vultures hissed and flapped their wings, unsettled. Their sharp eyes turned toward the horizon where the figure moved. The heat waves twisted the shape, making it blur, making it bend, but step by step it grew clearer. Someone was walking into the wasteland. The alien woman's eyes, half closed from weakness, flickered with faint awareness. Her heart, though faint, quickened with a question: was this real? She had been left for dead, abandoned to the birds, yet now, through the haze, she saw the outline of hope. The stranger moved with steady purpose. He did not rush, but neither did he falter. Each step pressed hard into the cracked earth. His shadow grew longer as he neared the circle of vultures. The birds hissed louder, wings snapping, feathers rattling like dry bones. One of them leapt into the air, circling lower, warning him away. But the stranger did not stop. He raised a hand to shield his eyes from the burning sky, and in that moment his face came into view. He was human, a young man, strong and weathered. His skin carried the burn of many suns, his clothes torn by travel. A harness strapped across his chest held tools and ropes. Dust clung to him like an old companion, yet his eyes were sharp, blue as the distant sky, and in those eyes burned something stronger than fear. He stopped a few paces away. The vultures now hissed and screeched with fury. The largest among them snapped its beak, daring him to come closer. The stranger did not flinch. Instead, he lowered his hand in study. At the scene, his gaze moved from the circle of predators to the broken woman on the ground. Her violet skin, her golden hair, her trembling frame. She was unlike anything he had seen before. Alien, fragile, beautiful. But to him she was not prey. She was someone left to die, and that was enough. The desert wind pulled at his hair, carried grit into his eyes. Still he stepped forward, his boots cracked the brittle ground, each sound like defiance. The vultures screamed louder, wings thrashing. One lunged forward, snapping its beak at his leg. The human lashed out with a kick, striking it back. The bird stumbled, shrieked, and retreated. The others stepped nervously, uncertain now. The woman's eyes widened faintly. Through the blur of her vision, she saw him, a being so strange, so different from her kind. Yet here he was, standing between her and death. She wanted to speak, but no words came, only a faint whisper of breath, almost a prayer. The stranger crouched beside her. His shadow fell across her face, shielding her from the burning sun. He reached into a pouch and pulled free a small flask. Unscrewing the cap, he offered it to her lips. She flinched at first, not knowing his intent, but the dryness in her throat was unbearable. Her cracked lips parted and she tasted water, cool, sweet, alive. It was the first relief she had felt since her family abandoned her, her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow this time, but of shock. Shock that someone had chosen to help her. A stranger, an alien to her, and yet more merciful than her own blood. The human studied her face as she drank. Her strength was faint, but he saw the spark still alive within her. He set the flask aside, glanced at the vultures, and tightened his grip on the rope around his chest. They were not finished. The vultures would not let go so easily, but neither would he. The desert had given him a choice. Walk away and live, or stay and fight for a stranger. He had already made his choice. He would not abandon her. Not here, not like this. The vultures screeched again, circling closer. The human stood tall, fists clenched, eyes hard. The desert was about to witness a clash of will, predators who fed on weakness, against a man who refused to look away. And in the middle of it all, the alien woman watched, her heart whispering a single truth she could not ignore. Her family had left her to die, but this human was her salvation. The desert held its breath. The vultures hissed and snapped their wings, restless and hungry. The alien woman lay weak in the sand, her golden hair tangled with dust, her violet skin pale under the harsh sun. And standing between her and the circle of predators was the human, silent, strong, uncertain but unbroken. His mind raced, though his body stood firm. He was far from home, far from safety. This was not his fight. He could turn away, leave the desert behind. No one would blame him. No one would know. He could walk on and live, yet his eyes returned to her. Her breaths were shallow, her body trembling. Her family had abandoned her, cast her aside like nothing. But even in her weakness, she clung to life. Her eyes, though dim, still held a spark. And that spark called to him. The largest vulture hissed and leapt forward, its claws scraping the ground. The others screamed in unison, flapping their wings in wild hunger. The human stepped back, then forward again. His fists tightened, his jaw clenched, fear pressed at his chest, whispering, "You cannot win." But another voice rose inside him, louder, stronger. "If you walk away, she dies." It was in that moment he knew this was not about winning or losing. This was about choosing, about deciding what kind of man he was. And the answer came like fire in his veins. He would not abandon her, not to the vultures, not to the desert, not to death. The human shouted, a raw, fierce cry that cut through the stillness. The Vu. Vultures flinched, startled. He grabbed a stone from the ground and hurled it with all his strength. It struck one bird's wing. The creature shrieked and stumbled back. Dust exploded around them. Feathers scattered. The circle broke for a moment. The woman blinked, her eyes wide. She had never seen such defiance, never seen someone fight for her without demand, without reason. Her family had judged her weak, worthless. But this human, he saw her not as a burden, but as someone worth saving. The vultures regrouped quickly, their cries louder, sharper. One swooped low, talons outstretched. The man ducked, rolled, and swung his rope. The weighted end cracked against the bird's side. It tumbled, screeching, then took off again into the sky. The other vultures circled closer, anger in their eyes. The largest spread its wings wide, larger than any man. It stepped forward with slow, heavy grace, daring him to fight. The human's chest heaved with breath, his muscles ached, but his eyes burned with fire. He planted his feet in the sand and raised his fists again. He would not back down. The woman tried to speak, her lips trembling. No words came, only a faint whisper of sound, but her heart screamed for him. Do not leave me. For the first time, she believed she might live. The vultures shrieked again, a wall of sound that rattled the stones. The human bared his teeth in reply, his own voice raw. The desert became an arena, life against death, courage against hunger. And though he stood alone, he did not feel alone. For in his choice, he had found something greater than fear. He had found purpose. He looked once more at the woman lying helpless behind him, then back at the predators before him. The choice was made, unshakable. He would fight, he would bleed if needed, but he would not walk away. And so, in that burning desert, a line was drawn. The vultures had claimed her as prey, but the human had claimed her as his to protect. The battle had not yet begun, but the desert already knew. This man would not surrender. The choice was made, and it would change everything. The desert grew louder, wings beat the air, claws scratched stone, and sharp cries filled the sky. The vultures no longer circled lazily. Now they attacked, hungry and furious. The human tightened his grip on the rope coiled across his chest. His eyes locked on the largest bird, the leader of the flock. Its shadow stretched long across the ground, swallowing the woman's fragile body. He stepped forward, planting himself between her and the beasts. The first vulture lunged, wings snapping, beak open wide. The man swung the rope, its weighted end cracking against the bird's side. It shrieked and stumbled back, feathers scattering. Dust flew into the air, the sound echoing across the wasteland. Another bird dived from above, talons outstretched like blades. The man rolled aside, his boots digging into the sand. The bird crashed down where he had stood, its claws tearing the ground. Before it could lift again, he snatched up a rock and smashed it against the creature's wing. The vulture screamed, flapping wildly, then lifted off into the sky. The circle was breaking, but only for a moment. More vultures pressed in, their cries sharp, cruel, endless. One pecked at the woman's arm, pulling at her torn clothing. Her weak voice broke into a faint cry. The man spun, rage flashing in his eyes. He charged, kicking the bird away, his fist striking its chest. The vulture tumbled back, stunned. The woman's eyes fluttered, her lips parted as she whispered, "Why?" But the man did not answer. He had no time for words. Every second was a battle. Every movement life or death. The largest vulture stepped forward, slower than the rest. It was patient, confident, its eyes glowing with malice. It spread its wings wide, blocking the sun. The man raised his rope, sweat dripping down his face. He knew this. One would not be driven off easily. The bird screeched and leapt, claws flashing. The man swung the rope, striking its chest, but the bird's weight crashed into him, knocking him back. He hit the ground hard, dust exploding around him. The bird's beak snapped down, inches from his face. He shoved his arm up, blocking the strike. The beak tore his sleeve, scraping his skin. Pain shot through him, but he gritted his teeth. With his free hand, he grabbed a sharp stone and drove it upward. The bird shrieked, flapping wildly, pulling back with rage. The man rolled to his knees, chest heaving, blood on his arm. Still, he stood again, his legs firm, the woman's eyes filled with tears. She had seen men of her kind abandon her, but this human, this stranger, battled death itself for her. She whispered again, her voice trembling, "Why? Save me?" He glanced at her, only for a heartbeat. His answer was simple, carried in his eyes, because no one else would. The vultures circled again, slower now. They hissed, they screamed, but they no longer rushed him. They had felt his strength, his defiance. The desert wind howled through the silence between cries. The man bent down, lifting the woman carefully. Her body was light, fragile in his arms. She gasped at the touch, her golden hair falling against his chest. Her heart beat weakly, but for the first time it carried hope. The vultures shrieked, furious at losing their prey. They circled high, shadows sweeping across the sand, but the human held her tight, his gaze hard. He had fought them, and he would fight them again, but he would not leave her to die. With each step, he carried her weight across the burning desert. The birds screamed above, their wings blotting out the sun. The fight was not over, far from it, but the rescue had begun, and the desert itself seemed to tremble with the promise of change. The vultures circled high above, still watching, still waiting, but for the moment, they kept their distance. The human walked with steady steps, the alien woman cradled in his arms, her golden hair brushing against his chest. Her breaths were shallow, yet stronger than before. The water he had given her gave her a small spark of life, but her body was weak, and her spirit even weaker. Every step he took shook her gently, reminding her she was still alive. The man stopped near a cluster of jagged rocks. They offered little shade, but enough to shield her from the burning sun. He set her down carefully, his hands gentle, as though she were made of glass. She winced softly, her body aching, but her eyes remained on him. He knelt in front of her, pulling the flask again from his pouch. Uncapping it, he pressed it to her lips. She hesitated for a moment, fear, confusion, distrust, but thirst was stronger. She drank, small sips at first, then more. Her throat burned, but the water soothed. A tear rolled down her cheek, falling into the dust. Her lips moved, trying to form words. At first, no sound came, only broken whispers. Then a faint voice, trembling and unsure. "Why? You? Help? The human froze. Her words were slow, broken, heavy with an accent, but he understood, not all of it, but enough. She had asked the question her heart had screamed since the moment he appeared. He studied her face, sweat dripping down his own. Her eyes, violet, bright even in weakness, searched his, desperate for an answer. He did not speak her language, not fully, but he did not need words. He touched his chest with his fist, then pointed gently to her. His gesture said enough. Because you are worth saving. She blinked, her lips parting in shock. No one had ever looked at her that way, not her family, not her people. They had left her because she was weak. But this man, this stranger, saw her differently. Human, she whispered, her voice breaking. He nodded once, simply. She pointed faintly to herself, whispering her name in her tongue. The sound was soft, strange, musical. The man repeated it, clumsy on his lips, but careful, respectful. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. For the first time since her abandonment, she felt seen. The wind howled through the rocks. Above, the vultures screeched again, circling lower. The woman shivered, fear flashing across her face. The man noticed. He stood quickly, scanning the skies, his body tense. He raised a hand to calm her, shaking his head. He would not let them near. Her heart ached with something new, not just survival, not just fear, but trust, fragile and uncertain. This man who owed her nothing had chosen to stand between her and death. Her voice cracked again, but this time it carried hope. You stay? The man met her gaze. He touched his chest again and nodded firmly. Yes, his eyes said, even if his lips could not. Her chest trembled, tears welling. For the first time in her life, she believed the word safe. The vultures shrieked louder, their patience thinning. The desert was not done with them yet, but the bond had been formed. Weak, fragile, but real. Two strangers, two worlds apart. Yet in this cruel wasteland, they had found one another. The woman leaned back against the rocks, her eyes heavy. Her lips whispered her name once more, softer this time. The man repeated it again, stronger, clearer. Her mouth curved faintly, almost a smile. Her body was broken, but her spirit flickered back to life. For in the heart of the desert, under the shadow of wings, the first words had been spoken, and from those words, something greater would grow. The desert stretched endlessly before them, the ground cracked and broken, the air heavy with heat. Every horizon looked the same, waves of dust, red sky, shadows that offered no comfort. The human tightened his grip around the alien woman, lifting her once more into his arms. She was light, too light, as if her body was already fading from the world. Her head rested weakly against his chest, her golden hair tangled with sweat and dust. Each breath she took was shallow but steady. Every step he made carried her farther from death. But above them, death followed. The vultures circled, wings spread wide, black shadows gliding across the sand. They did not strike yet. They were waiting, watching. Hunters patient enough to let exhaustion finish what they had begun. The man's boots sank into the soft earth. His muscles burned, his throat dry. The flask at his side was almost empty. He gave her the last drops, refusing any for himself. She looked at him with wide eyes. Her lips trembled as if to protest, but no strength remained to argue. Her heart whispered only gratitude. The sun blazed, cruel and merciless. Sweat dripped down his back, his breath heavy. The weight of the woman was nothing compared to the weight of the desert pressing against him. Each dune felt taller, each step longer, but he did not stop. The vultures shrieked above, their cries sharp, cruel. One swooped low, its wings beating the sand into a storm. The man ducked, shielding the woman in his arms. The bird pulled back at the last second, mocking him. Another answered with a scream, as if laughing from the sky. Still, he pressed on, his jaw tight. The woman stirred faintly, her eyes opened, violet against the harsh red light. She looked at him, weak but filled with wonder. Her family had called her useless. Her people had left her as prey. Yet this stranger carried her as though her life mattered. Her lips moved, whispering something in her tongue. The words too soft for him to understand, but the tone clear. She was not ready to die. The man's steps slowed, his knees bending. The desert fought him with every grain of sand. But he pushed forward. He would not fall, not while she depended on him. Hours passed, though time lost all meaning. The sun began to dip, turning the sky into a river of fire. Shadows stretched longer, the air cooling slightly, but the vultures did not leave. They followed like spirits of death, silent but ever near. At last, he reached a ridge of stone. There, he set her down gently, his body trembling from exhaustion. His chest rose and fell like waves against the shore. The woman's eyes fluttered open. She studied him, confusion and awe mixing in her gaze. He tore a strip of cloth from his sleeve, wrapped it around his bleeding arm, where the vulture had struck earlier. The wound stung, but he made no sound. Instead, he turned back to her. He raised a hand in a calming gesture, as if to promise, "I will keep you safe." Her lips moved again, a whisper carried by the wind. He leaned closer, trying to catch the sound. This time, one word reached him. Together. The human froze. Though her accent twisted the word, he understood. His eyes softened, his chest tightening. Yes, he thought, together. Above, the vultures shrieked once more. Their patience was thinning, but the desert was no longer only a place of death. It was a path they would walk, step by step, side by side, even if only one of them had the strength to walk it. The man lifted her again, his body screaming in pain, yet his eyes were fierce. The vultures could wait, the desert could rage, but he would not stop. And as the last light of the sun fell across the wasteland, the desert bore witness to something rare. A human carrying more than weight. He carried hope. The desert changed as the sun sank. The burning sky bled into purple, then into black. The heat faded, but the cold came quickly, sharp and merciless. The ground, once hot enough to burn, now chilled like stone. The human felt the bite of night air cutting into his skin, but he held on. For in his arms, the alien woman still trembled, weak and fragile. Her violet skin looked paler under the silver light of twin moons. Her eyes flickered open, catching the glow of the stars. She whispered something in her tongue, faint and unsure. The words slipped past him, but her tone was clear. Fear. She was afraid of the night, afraid of what waited in the dark. The vultures had not gone. Their shadows moved across the moonlight, silent now, only circling, waiting. The man knew they were patient. The desert was their home. They could outlast him if he faltered. He searched the barren land. At last, he found a hollow beneath a broken ridge of stone. It was small, barely enough for two, but it offered shelter from the wind. Carefully, he set her down inside. Her breath rose in tiny clouds, her body shivering. The man knelt and gathered what little the desert gave. Dry twigs, sharp grass, brittle roots. He struck stones together, sparks leaping, again and again until flame caught. A fire flickered to life. Its glow painted the hollow in warm light, chasing the cold away. The woman's eyes widened. She reached toward the flame with trembling fingers. The warmth touched her skin, and a soft sigh escaped her lips. For a moment she looked less like prey, more like someone who belonged to the living again. The human sat near her, his arms still bandaged with cloth, his body sore and tired, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching the shadows outside. Every cry of the vultures made his hand tighten on his rope. Every gust of wind carried the scent of danger. The woman turned her gaze to him, her lips parted, forming a word she struggled to say. At last, her voice broke through the silence. "You fight for me." Her accent bent the words, but he understood. He looked at her, then nodded once, simple but certain. She blinked, her eyes glistening in the firelight. Her family had left her, called her weak, left her to die. Yet here was a man of another kind, a stranger from a world unknown, fighting against beasts, carrying her through endless sands. Why? She could not understand, but her heart whispered something she had never felt before. Trust. The night deepened, stars burning bright across the sky. The desert, though cold, was strangely alive. Distant cries echoed, animals hunting in the dark. The vultures still circled, their wings casting fleeting shadows across the moonlight, but they did not descend, not while fire burned, for even predators feared flame. The man leaned back against the stone, his eyelids heavy, but his will strong. He could not afford to sleep deeply. Every sound, every whisper of wings kept him alert. Still, for a moment, his gaze softened. He looked at the woman, resting weakly by the fire, and a thought rose unbidden. She should not die here. The woman stirred, her violet eyes half open. She whispered again, her voice softer than the wind. "You stay." He met her gaze, nodded once more, and placed a hand over his chest. His gesture was his vow. "Yes, I stay." Her lips trembled, almost forming a smile. Her eyes closed, this time not from despair, but from the comfort of knowing she was not alone. The desert wind howled, the vultures screamed above. Yet inside the hollow, a fragile peace took root. And as the fire cracked and the night grew colder, the desert bore witness to something it rarely saw. Not just survival, but the beginning of a bond forged in fire, fear, and trust, a bond that would not easily break. Ashes glowed red, sparks floating like tiny stars before vanishing into the dark. The human sat awake, his eyes heavy but alert. Every cry of the vultures above reminded him danger still lingered, yet for now the flames kept them away. Beside him, the alien woman stirred. Her breaths came steadier now, no longer as faint. The warmth of the fire and the water he gave her had returned a little strength. Slowly, her violet eyes opened, glowing faintly in the firelight. She looked at him, her gaze thoughtful, heavy with unspoken words. For a long time, silence stretched between them. The human said nothing, waiting. At last, her lips parted, her voice trembling but stronger than before. "My family," she whispered, the word broken but clear. He turned to her, frowning. Her eyes dropped to the ground, her hands shaking. "They left me," she said, pausing between each word. Her voice was filled with pain. "They say, weak, no use, only burden." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "They leave me here, pray, to die." The words struck the human like a stone. He stared at her, shocked by the cruelty, to leave one of their own behind, to cast her to death. It was unthinkable. His hands clenched into fists, anger flickering in his chest, not at her, but at those who abandoned her. The woman's eyes glistened with tears. "They no look back," she whispered. "No mercy, no love." She drew her arms around herself, shivering, though the fire burned warm. "I call, I cry, they walk away." Her voice cracked, the words breaking like glass. For a moment, she looked less like an alien and more like a lost child. The human leaned closer, his face softening. He shook his head slowly. Though words failed him, his eyes spoke for him. "You are not a burden." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. The warmth of his hand steadied her trembling, her violet eyes lifted, was to meet his. "You, different," she whispered. "You fight. You carry. Why?" Her voice cracked on the last word, filled with confusion and wonder. The human thought for a moment, searching for simple words. At last he spoke softly, his voice low but firm. "Because life matters." The woman blinked, stunned by the answer. Her lips trembled. "Life matters," she repeated slowly, tasting the words as if they were new. Her people had not believed that, not for her, but this human did. His belief lit something inside her, something she thought had died. The night deepened, stars burning bright across the black sky. The vultures shrieked again, but their voices sounded farther away. For in the hollow, beside the fire, a different sound lived. Hope. The woman leaned back, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but her heart lighter than before. Her thoughts raced. She remembered her family's faces as they turned from her, the coldness in their eyes, the silence that followed. And then she remembered the human's face, his fierce eyes as he fought the birds, his arms carrying her through endless sands. She had been abandoned, but she was no longer alone. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Maybe, not curse, maybe gift." The human tilted his head, not understanding, but she smiled faintly, though her lips were weak, for in her heart she knew being abandoned had led her here, to him. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the stone walls. The human leaned back, still alert, but his gaze softened as he watched her drift into sleep. Her breath steady, her body no longer trembling, her spirit, though scarred, had begun to heal. And as the night stretched on, the desert learned her secret. Her family had cast her aside. But in that hollow, by the fire, she had found something greater than family. The beginning of trust, the beginning of belonging, the beginning of salvation. The first light of dawn touched the desert. The horizon glowed red and gold, spilling warmth across the cracked ground. The fire had died to ash, smoke curling weakly into the morning air. The human sat awake, his body stiff, his eyes sharp. Beside him, the alien woman stirred. Her strength was faint, but her eyes shone brighter than before. She pushed herself upright, leaning weakly against the stone. Her lips formed a whisper. "Morning." The human gave a faint nod, his gaze fixed on the sky. For above them the vultures had returned, dozens of dark wings blotting out the sun. Their cries filled the desert like war drums. They were no longer patient, they were ready. The woman shivered, fear flashing in her violet eyes. She remembered their claws, their hunger. But when she turned to the human, she saw no fear, only determination. His jaw was set, his hands ready, even bruised, bleeding and tired. He stood as if nothing could break him. The largest vulture swooped low, wings wide like a storm. Its claws struck the sand, scattering dust. The human grabbed a burning branch from the dead fire and swung. Flames roared as the bird shrieked, pulling back. Smoke rose, firelight flickered. The man's voice tore through the air in a fierce cry. The desert echoed with his defiance. The other vultures screamed in answer. One dove, beak snapping, the human struck with the branch, sparks flying as feathers burned. The bird tumbled back with a cry. Another came from behind. The man spun, swinging wide. His strength was fading, but his will was iron. The woman watched, her heart pounding. Every strike he made, every shout. He was fighting not just for himself, but for her. Her hands trembled, her body weak, yet something inside her refused to stay still. The largest vulture landed, its shadow covering them both. It hissed, stepping closer, its glowing eyes fixed on the woman. The human moved to block, raising the flaming branch, but his knees shook, his body screaming with exhaustion. The vulture lunged, its claws slashing. He stumbled, falling to one knee. The woman cried out, "No!" In that moment, her fear broke into fire. She grabbed a sharp stone from the ground. With trembling strength, she hurled it at the beast. The rock struck its face. The vulture reeled back, shrieking in pain. The human looked at her in shock. Her violet eyes burned now, not with despair, but with courage. He rose again, fueled by her defiance. Together they faced the monsters. He swung the flaming branch. She hurled stones with shaking hands. The vultures shrieked and beat their wings. But the fire, the stones, the will to live pushed them back. The largest gave one final scream. It spread its wings, towering above them. The human roared, charging. He swung the branch with all his remaining strength. Flames burst across its feathers. The beast staggered, shrieking, then leapt into the sky. The others followed, retreating into the blazing dawn. Silence returned. Only the crackle of ash and the beating of two hearts remained. The human dropped the branch, his chest heaving. The woman crawled to him, her hands trembling. "Together," she whispered again, her voice stronger this time. He looked at her, and for the first time he smiled. The desert, once a grave, had become a witness, not to death, but to survival, not to abandonment, but to salvation. The vultures had fled, but their story had only begun. The alien woman had been left by her own, forsaken, forgotten. But a human, a stranger, had given her what her family never could: hope, courage, life. And as the sun rose higher, painting the sky with fire, the desert learned a truth it would carry forever. Where others abandon, humanity stays. Where others let the weak fall, humanity lifts them. And in that moment, humanity shined brighter than the dawn.